If an alien came down from wherever aliens come from and said, "This Emily Dickinson, we've heard of her, the greatest poet of all time. We were wondering if there was anything from Emily Dickinson that you would bring to us to read. The one poem that I might choose before any other Emily Dickinson poems would be Because I Could Not Stop for Death." Why? Well, because it is quite possibly the most emblematic of Emily Dickinson poem that there is. It's creepy. There is the appearance of death personified. It has an odd conceit at the core of the poem. There is a couple odd word choices, some words that you would not normally find in your day to day language. There is someone being dead and hardly noticing. And also, it's funny. This video is part of 3 separate playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being obviously the Echoes of Emily playlist, but number 2 being a playlist of Emily Dickinson poetry discussions, and third, the general playlist for poetry discussions. If you like or appreciate the work that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. So consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more literature in the future. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer, my gown, my tippet, only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then 'tis centuries, and yet feel shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. I have 4 talking points to go through here, but I thought it would be a little bit profitable to maybe go through the poem one more time in order to sort of walk through what is actually happening. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We have an individual who is busy living their life, and they die. So, too busy to stop for death, death stops for this individual and collects them. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. To put away your labor is to put away the way that you make a living. To put away your leisure is to put away those things for which your living is spent, right? Your job and your hobbies. You've put both of them away for the civility of death. Death knows none of those things. Wouldn't it be rude to talk about your job with death? Wouldn't it be rude to tell death about your baseball card collection? We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. I think that the key to this stanza is right here. We have a time of life here. We have children at school. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We could see this as the sort of summer of life, right? We passed the fields of gazing grain. That is the time of work in our life. We passed the setting sun. The setting sun often being used to represent death, or rather, he passed us. Remember, we could not stop for death. Death stopped for us. So the setting sun, the dying sun, the dying of the day had passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill. We're in the night time now. For only gossamer, my gown, my clothes were only thin, dress up like material. Gossamer is a type of material that is light and lithe. Gossamer is a type of material that would often be used in clothes that you're not using work to do. Okay, so that it's also, so there's a double meaning here. This is a dress material, a dress up material for clothing. It is also gossamer, a word often used to refer to the thread spun by spiders. So there's that. My tippet only tulle. Tippet is sort of like a scarf type thing. Tulle is a very light material that is often used in veils. Now, in my opinion, what this is saying is that we think of a scarf in most climates to go around the neck, right? Sort of an accessory type thing. Used around the neck, keep your neck a little bit warmer, keep your core a little bit warmer. But really, if it gets cold enough, you're gonna put that bad boy around your mouth, aren't you? You're gonna put that bad boy up around your face. You might even wrap it around your head once or twice. Your tippet only tulle. Tulle is a veil. Often a word or often used to refer to a veil. So we have here my tippet only tulle. The thing that's protecting me for warmth in my head and neck is only this veil type material. Where might one wear a veil? Maybe to get married. Maybe once you're dead. So there's a little bit of a double meaning there as well. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. In my opinion, this is talking about it's talking about being buried. So we're talking about the ever after house. We're talking about a coffin, which is not a house, but it's where you're going to live from here on out. Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feel shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Not a whole lot to really go through here, just our speaker realizing how long it is that they have been in the company of death. But it does not feel that long. It feels shorter than the day that she realized she was with death. So, tone, the first thing I want to talk about here, is this a funny poem? This right here. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Imagine this, not in poetry, but in what is often referred to as British humor. Well, I was too busy to stop for death, right? Stop for me, though. That was nice, isn't it? Right? That sort of, that recognition of an inevitability, which was tried to be won over by the speaker. The speaker tried to be too busy for death, but that's fine. Death will wait for you, right? Is this a funny line? I think if you give Emily Dickinson her full array of credit, yes, it is. This is a funny line. I couldn't stop for death. He stopped for me, though. Wasn't that nice? And because of that, this is not a poem which is dripping with overt tragedy. This is not I Died for Beauty, for example. There are so many of Emily Dickinson's poems where she's willing to go that far and make the sort of goth observations. Doesn't happen here. All of the observations here are in passing. All of the observations here are indeed passive. We don't have any outright emotion from our speaker, just slow realizations. So, because the sense of humor in those first two lines, is this actually more tragic? Because we, from the outside, can see, oh, well, our speaker's dead. Our speaker's dead and gone. Our speaker wasted their life working. That's kind of the statement made by this poem. Was too busy with life, was too busy probably with work, and ended up dead and not even knowing it. That is tragic. The dead and not even knowing it part is tragic because our speaker is obviously not even to the point where they are taking something seriously. Our speaker has not put in the great work of life, but has perhaps put in just work. So, I said I wanted to work in nihilism and hauntology to all of these discussions. I ask you this, in this poem, what does death represent? It can represent any number of things, but if I'm going to give an interpretation, I'm going to bring nihilism into it. Nihilism, so let's see here. Do I have that in this document? There is a quote, one of my favorite quotes of all time. Oh, what did I do here? This comes to us from Dmitry Pisarev. In short, here is the ultimatum of our camp. What can be smashed must be smashed. Whatever will withstand the blow is good. What flies into smithereens is rubbish. In any case, strike out right and left. No harm will or can come of it. Death in this poem is a nihilist. And not the passive nihilist, not the weak nihilist, not the nihilist that says, oh, woe is me, everything is bad. No. Our death in this poem is recognizing all of those things that do not work. Our death in this poem is striking out right, striking out left, and our speaker was smashed to smithereens. Also, look at that second stanza on the screen right now. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. Someone putting away all of the things that they have known in their life for your civility, does that make you sound like a weak person? It does not. However, death knowing, everybody's in a hurry, especially our speaker. Our speaker could not stop for death. So, once she's aboard, I don't care. I'm going to go slow. That is nihilism. That is our speaker saying, I do not care about your rules. I will construct my rules. I will live by them. I will abide by them. So here's the final thing I want to talk about in this poem. It's a talking point. This poem has appeared on this channel probably 5 times by now. It's a great poem. I have used this argument several times that what death is doing is taking our speaker past the school. Well, that's where young people are. Taking our speaker through this confusing area where they are cold, and all of their stuff looks like either a wedding gown or a death gown, right? All of their clothes looks like a wedding gown or a death gown. We'll say it's a wedding gown. It's confusion there. So we go from childhood to where you become an adult. And then this here, we're talking about a coffin. So we go from childhood to adulthood to death. However, if we are to take this poem in the understanding or through the lens of hauntology, we could say that instead of this being walking through the stages of life, we are going to say that this is temporal dislocation, meaning confusion of time. So, is this a school? No. It's our speaker's school. In fact, it is the school our speaker attended. In fact, our speaker is there in this very poem. She is outside the confines of time. This, when we're looking at this questionable attire, this attire which is questionably for marriage or death, I will say marriage here. We will stick to the coming of adulthood here. This is not just used to remind our speaker of coming to adulthood. It is our very speaker's coming to adulthood. Witnessing, feeling those things on her body transform from being tippet to being tool. And then finally, this is our speaker's very own death, our speaker's very own coffin. We are seeing all of these things at the same time with our speaker because our speaker is dead. Our speaker, in hauntological terms, is suffering from temporal dislocation. Our speaker is seeing all the stages of her very own life at the same time because they are outside the confines of time. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. We passed the school, where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer, my gown, my tippet, only tool. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then 'tis centuries, and yet feel shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity.